evening. Welcome to the Soper Reese Theater and the first town hall meeting that has been conducted in about 4 years. So welcome, you are part of history here. So let's make some history tonight. There's a lot of familiar faces I see out there. My name is Michael Moss. I work for Lake County Behavioral Health Services, and I'm a prevention specialist with them. I want to, first of all, kind of thank the Soper Reese Theater for generously offering this great venue to support this. And I'm hoping for a productive meeting tonight. It's going to be, this is a very hot topic. I've been doing a lot of reading on it the last week, and it's a very hot topic right now. And hopefully we can come together as a community and build some connection here, and hopefully come up with some productive solutions to moving as we move forward with this. We are also being live streamed on YouTube. I believe it's under Lakeport PD. Just enter Lakeport PD. We are being live streamed on YouTube. I got the thumbs up. Tech guys are back there. Bruno, thank you. And Thomas, appreciate it. A little bit of background on myself. Again, it's Michael Moss. I'm with Lake County Behavioral Health Services. Ooh. Hello. Again, I'm a prevention specialist, and our team has probably one of the best jobs I think there is out there. I love my job. I love what our agency gives us a freedom to provide the services that we do inside schools. We're responsible for going inside into high schools and teaching mental health first aid. I'm going to plug that right now because it's important to me. It's important to our team that we educate our young ones on mental health first aid. And that is giving them the education on recognizing signs and symptoms of mental health barriers, substance abuse barriers, and also suicidal ideation. Our goal, main goal, and I think I can speak for Lake County Behavioral Health Services, is we want to reduce stigma. Stigma is important on the language we use in breaking down barriers to, everybody has words, certain words they use towards certain things. And we want to break that in an effort to make services more available. Stigma really puts a barrier on people seeking out help. It's shameful to them, and they don't feel like they can come out and actually get the help that they actually need without being ridiculed. So stigma is a big part of what we wanted to reduce in the community. We teach your young ones, because we go into high schools, so your young ones are amongst us. We teach them about empathy, being empathetic towards one another, their peers, their friends. This breaks down a lot of barriers as well. If they can actually connect with their friends, connect with their community, build some empathy, it creates more of a recovery, more of a balanced life, more of a healthy lifestyle, and it protects them from a lot of the risk factors that go on in their stressful lives as teenagers. I want to bring up a couple words. They only gave me like 10 minutes. I could probably stand up here for a lot longer than that, but they gave me 10 minutes, so we'll keep on track. Excuse me. I'm a social worker. Basically, when it comes right down to it, I'm a social worker. And as a social worker, there's a kind of a buzzword out there. It's cultural humility. And that's what we're going to be talking a lot about tonight, I think. empathy, stigma reduction. Cultural humility allows me as a social worker, my goal as a social worker, it's a lifelong education that I have to practice each and every day, and I hope by the end of the night, everybody in here will as well. Cultural humility is understanding a culture. We all come from different cultures. Each one of us come from a different culture. As we go through our day-to-day lives, we pass through 10, 15, 20, 25 cultures different from our own, each and every day. And it's the positiveness that we can bring as human beings. We can bring that positiveness to each and every culture that we touch, and hopefully gather a little bit of information from each of those cultures and pass along our positive culture as well. The homeless is their culture, and we have to try and understand their culture and where they're coming from. We don't know what they've walked through in life. We don't know their backgrounds. We don't know their home environment. We don't know anything about them a lot of times unless you've taken the time to stop and ask them. And I would encourage you to do that. By a show of hands, who has spoke to a homeless person in the last 30 days? Excellent. Excellent. And I hope we can take a breath when we do so, remove our biases, because we've all got them. Let's face it, we've all got bias. And put those aside, do a little self-reflecting, and say, hey, step back. Let's try and understand where they're coming from and how can we better serve them. They're part of our community, and we want to build a relationship that's positive moving forward. I'll stop short here. I'd like to, for everybody, just stand for a second. Just humor me for a second. And I want just to you to look around. Just kind of look around. You don't have to shake hands or anything like that. If you want to, you can. But just make eye contact and recognize your community. I can see you up there in the balconies. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. I can barely see it because I got the sun in my eyes. But we're community, right? And I thank each and every one of you for stepping out here and giving up some time in your evening to build connection with this community. This panel up here, who I will introduce in just a second, great panel. They support all of our needs. They're trying their best, believe me. I know these people, they've tried their best. But yeah, just build some connection tonight. So I thank you very much for all. Just so you can have a seat. So we mentioned a part of history. Let's make this a part of history. We want to learn from our teenagers, who I talked about in high schools. Learn from them being empathetic, put our biases away for the night, and try to learn about this culture that we're going to be talking about tonight. I just ask you, one night. Okay, keep it on a positive, and we can look back, I don't know, maybe someday look back on this evening and go, hey, I was a part of that night. And I was a part of that change. And we did it as a community, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take everybody. Okay? Thank you. So without further ado, introduce our glorious panel over here. First up on the notes, Elise Jones, Lake County Behavioral Health Services Director. Executive Director of Lake Family Resource Center, Lisa Morrow. Chief of Lakeport PD, Brad Rasmussen. Lakeport City Manager, Kevin Ingram. Our Lieutenant of Lakeport Police Department, Dale Stobie. Brad somewhere back here. Okay. And Brad Anarato, basically is Mike Thompson's, Senator Mike Thompson. He's standing up there. Brad's his right-hand man. Slide, please. I don't see our guy up there. Oh, there he is. Thanks, Thomas.
Hi, I'm Congressman Mike Thompson. I wish I could be with you in person, but work has me in Washington, D.C. Thank you for coming out to participate in the Lake County Town Hall. Civic participation is an essential part of representative government, and by making your voice heard today and hearing directly from outstanding public servants like Chief Rasmussen, City Manager Ingram, Director Jones, and Executive Director Morrow, you are helping us make our community a better place for everyone. Thank you to all the sponsors of this town hall, to Mediacom for assisting with live streaming the event, and to all who came out to participate. I hope to see you all soon, in person next time.
Okay, once again, we welcome community feedback. We do want to make this a safe place, a safe zone for everybody, so be nice. My bosses are here. If I have to tackle somebody, I might. You will receive comment cards, just like these right here. On them, your information will be written on there. Please write legibly so we can get to you. If your question doesn't get answered tonight, we are going to do our best to get to you and answer all of your questions. Okay, so if they can't get answered tonight, they will be answered if you have these filled out properly. On there is a question. There will be volunteers that are going to be walking around as you fill these out, and just hold your hand up and they will collect them. They will come down to our panel and they will be answered by the appropriate person. On there is the line for question. There is also lines for a solution. So if you've got, I don't want to be politically incorrect, but all of my managers, all of my bosses in life have always told me, if you're going to come to me with a complaint, you better have 3 solutions written right underneath it, or get out of my office. So, solutions are always a good thing, and they're welcomed. Slide. The agenda. We'll be going over some myths and facts about homelessness. There's a lot of things that I've heard, and we will hopefully be able to answer some of those questions as well. History of how we got here. Legislation that's been from the past, and also legislation that's now being drawn up as we speak. Overview on behavioral health services, treatment obstacles, what resources are available, limitations of those resources. There'll be a briefing on CalAIM, if anybody's familiar with that, and justice-involved services as well. So again, we welcome all questions, and we will be turning it over. I believe Chief Rasmussen is up first.
In fact, most homeless people are nonviolent, and most of them are actually more likely to become a victim of a crime than actually be the perpetrator. That is not always true. We know there are exceptions. I can give you a couple right now. In the area of homeless individuals being victims of crime, we just had a case that we finished a couple weeks ago where a homeless individual received a 45-year to life sentence for sexual assaults against homeless women in our community. That just occurred. That sentence was handed down a couple weeks ago. And we did unfortunately have an incident 2 weeks ago where a homeless individual went to a business person's facility on Main Street in Lakeport and made some criminal threats against them and actually assaulted that business owner. We responded and arrested that person, and he was in jail for a few days. However, because of some of the criminal justice changes that we've had in California, that individual was released on his own recognizance a few days later and is now back on the street. We'll get into some of those criminal justice changes here shortly so that you can kind of have a better understanding of what we're facing in our response to addressing the crime problems. Another myth is that most homeless come from other areas. That is not the research. That's not what we're finding. In fact, the majority of the homeless individuals that we are dealing with on our streets in Lakeport actually are residents of the community or had some kind of a tie to Lakeport or Lake County. On average, those residents have lived in the county for 20 years or more. The third common myth is that homeless people are unhoused because of their bad choices or personal faults. While there are some truths to that in some cases, that's not the case in the majority of the situations. If we just understand that many of us could just be one paycheck away from facing our own ability to house ourselves or take care of ourselves. Next slide, please. So I think it's important that the community have some history of the criminal justice system in California over the past 30 years, because there's been very significant changes that really kind of challenge our ability to address the crime problems. If we go back to 1994 is when California was all about holding people who commit crimes accountable and all about victims' rights. That's when we had the 3 strikes laws that came into effect. That was back in 1994. So there was a lot of people going to prison who had prior violent felonies, and then when they got picked up again for any kind of a felony, they could get 25 years to life in prison. So we had a lot of people going to prison for a lot of different types of felony crimes. 1996, I'm going to bring the lieutenant up to mention this next one.
Yes, so as the chief was describing, prior to the 94 3 strikes law, which actually was voted into law as well by the voters, the trial judges had a lot of discretion at sentencing, and there was a significant amount of decisions that they could make. And now with this law, it essentially took that out of their hands by and large in a large number of felony cases. They had determinate sentences. In many instances, they could run consecutively. So you had people serving 25 to life, sometimes 3 or 4 of those in a row. So very long sentences, taken away from the discretion of the judges, until a very creative trial judge in the county of San Diego used a penal code section that existed prior to 3 strikes that allowed trial judges to dismiss criminal activity for the furtherance of justice. And the people of San Diego, which really translates into the prosecutor's office, filed a suit against the county of San Diego, and that was decided in the California Supreme Court, which upheld that ability for judges now, even moving past 3 strikes, to apply that in instances to take away that exposure that defendants had to 3 strikes. Now, that having been said, the 10 years after the enactment of 3 strikes, even with this ability to limit its application, we saw a tremendous growth in the prison population, actually about 800%. Went from 5,000 inmates to more than 40,000 inmates in just that 10-year period of time. And I'm not saying that that's directly the result of 3 strikes, but there's just no getting around the fact that that was the most significant increase in the prison population in its entire history. So next, we move to, back one slide, please. In 2005, the Jones versus City of Los Angeles decision was one of the first decisions that really related to homelessness and the justice system and criminality. In this particular instance, the City of Los Angeles had enacted municipal codes that restricted people from sleeping, lying, or sitting in any public space at any time. It was against the law. At the same time, they provided shelter services, but their shelters were 50,000 beds short of what they needed to effectively shelter homeless people. And as a result, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, so this was a federal case, and we're in the Ninth District, or the Ninth Circuit, as well as the City of Los Angeles. So we listen to these laws when case law decisions get handed down from the Ninth Circuit. And what they said in their opinion is that it is unconstitutional to prevent people from being in public spaces anytime. There has to be some time, because if they're not allowed to sit, sleep, or lie in public spaces, then they can't sleep. And not being able to sleep is a violation of the 8th Amendment of the Constitution, cruel and unusual punishment. So this decision came down in 2005. And these are going to be, we're going to be discussing these things further as we go through the obstacleization, both prison overcrowding and the judicial system addressing homelessness.
Moving on to 2014, there was a ballot initiative called Proposition 47. The title of it was the Safe Schools and Neighborhoods Act of 2014. It actually had nothing to do with schools or neighborhoods, but that was the title of the act. And that was a voter initiative that a group of persons took forward to the voters of California, who then voted to pass it. Basically, what it did, the most significant things that it did, is it reduced all the drug possession crimes from felonies down to misdemeanors. So it's no longer a felony to possess, for example, methamphetamine or heroin or cocaine. Another thing that it did that significantly impacted businesses, specifically retailers in California, is that it eliminated the felony provisions for shoplifting and petty theft. So back before 2014, for example, if you had 2 prior theft convictions for shoplifting or stealing or any type of theft, then on the 3rd and subsequent one, you could be filed on for a felony charge for having the priors. And you could actually go to jail for a period of time or even prison for that felony. Now, since that's been eliminated, you could be arrested for, as long as you don't take over $950 worth of items, you can be arrested 100 times, 1,000 times. It's never going to amount to a felony. It's only ever going to get you cited, and if you do get prosecuted, you'd be put on misdemeanor probation, and there'd be no supervision for that. And there can be no prior chargings. Those were the significant items with that proposition. Then in I should have done this in reverse, but in 2011, the other significant thing that happened was because, for two reasons, California was under a mandate from a federal court to reduce its prison population. And we also had the budget crisis that was happening in 2009, 2010. So this was a governor and legislative item where basically what they did is they realigned the criminal justice system. So let's say in California we have 600 felony crimes in all the different codes. What they did is they said that all but 60 of those crimes, which are the most violent, most serious in California, everything else, if you get convicted for a felony on those other 500 crimes, you will not serve your time in a state prison. You'll serve your time in a county jail. And we have people serving 10 years in a county jail in every county in California. I've even sentences longer than that. So the point to note for our community is that our jails are now full. They've turned into prisons. So there's no room for the misdemeanor accountability, the misdemeanor crimes, because that's what the state transitioned to. The majority of the felonies serving time in a county jail, so they've turned into prisons. And then when you do get released, there is no more state parole. You're released to the probation department for community supervision. So that's how that works. Then in 2016, another voter initiative that groups took forward that the voters again passed was called the Public Safety Rehabilitation Act of 2016. Slide, please. Thank you, Kelly. And it's on the slide to my left. So basically what that proposition did is it took away the charging ability for enhancements on felony crimes. So let's say before this proposition, if you got arrested for a robbery and then you used a gun in the course of that robbery, that would be another allegation. You had a prior prison term for something else, that would be another allegation. Now you can only be held accountable on the original crime. And let's say the robbery was a 4-year term, but you could have got 12 years with all these enhancements. Now if you get convicted, it's only going to be on the robbery for the original 4 years. So this and Proposition 47 were retroactive. So back to 47, if you were in prison for one of the crimes that got reduced to a misdemeanor, you got immediately released upon the passing of that. So that's why, and the same thing with 57. So that's why there's been massive amounts of people released back onto the streets from prison. I'm only going to briefly mention the 2018, that was Senate Bill 1437. Basically what that did is it eliminated the felony murder rule. It's another law to basically reduce the accountability. And so in the past, let's say there was 2 people, you were going to commit a robbery. One person was driving the car, the other person went into the store, used the gun to commit the robbery, but actually shot and killed somebody. In the past, both could be charged with that murder. Now only the person that had the gun. So, and we don't have those situations here, fortunately, but it's important to know with the overall changes in the criminal justice system. Then that same year, the Boise versus Martin lawsuit that went to the Ninth Circuit Court. That's the one that you may have heard of, where the Ninth Circuit said in the city of Boise, Idaho, that they could not enforce their camping ordinances where they had unhoused individuals that were camping on the streets unless they had sufficient shelter space to offer them. And so because that's a Ninth Circuit Court decision, that applies throughout the western United States and Hawaii, so it applies here in Lakeport. And so we have to deal with that Boise decision when we are enforcing camping laws and things like that, where basically if we don't have sufficient shelter space, and we don't, then we can't enforce somebody camping on the public sidewalk under the Ninth Circuit Court decision. I will mention, and we're doing research on it now, that just in the past recent weeks, the Ninth Circuit has ruled on an injunction that happened in the city of San Francisco, where they've now said, okay, San Francisco, if you offer them shelter and they refuse it, they would be considered now voluntarily homeless, and you can't enforce all those laws. So we don't yet know how that's going to apply to all the other cities, but that's something that we're going to be researching, because the court is starting to look at these things a little bit differently. And that brings up the lieutenant again.
Yeah, but just to build a little bit on what the chief was saying about proposition or the realignment and the 2014 Prop 47. You know, these, although I didn't get to Prop 57 where they finally said, okay, this is dealing with prison overcrowding. You know, there's, you know, I don't think it's working. Hello, can you hear me? It's okay.
This one is working.
Yeah. Can you hear me? There we go. I can hear me, and I'm hard of hearing, so it must be working. So, you know, from realignment, we saw about a 2% drop in the prison population the year immediately after, and then basically no decrease until 2014, Prop 47. In 2015, there was short of a 5% decrease in prison population. Now we're talking about an 800% increase in 1994, and now we're seeing a reduction of less than 5%. And moving forward, the reduction has been negligible, plus and minus maybe 1%. So the prison population has not significantly decreased. In fact, most of the California prisons are operating at overcapacity, some of them as much as 50% overcapacity. You know, so there's a lot of question as to whether the legislators are done yet. I don't know. But you know, it takes us to some other laws and legislation that they're enacting. This Senate Bill 731, that allows somebody 1, 2, or 3 years after serving their felony sentence, now they can get that erased from their criminal history. You know, what the total effects of that are going to be, we'll have to watch that play out. And the last bit of significant legislation relative specifically to homelessness is just a few months ago, Johnson versus the city of Grants Pass in Oregon. Grants Pass had enacted a number of ordinances against camping and sitting and lying in public. They also had enacted an ordinance that allowed them to exclude people who had already violated these ordinances from public spaces. And it also, in that exclusion, created a situation where somebody was no longer allowed to be on public lands. They were subject to trespassing. Sounds like a creative way through administrative citations in handling the homelessness and circumventing these previous decisions. Except the Ninth Circuit Circuit Court of Appeals stepped in on this one as well. And again, reiterated, as back in 2005 and in Martin versus Boise, telling people that they can never sleep, stand, sit on public lands ever is always going to be unconstitutional. And interestingly enough, in this decision, they also indicated that municipalities were going to start having to be responsible for some rudimentary necessities for sleeping relative to the environment. What that means, we don't know. As with much case law, we just wait and see how this plays out. But, you know, we're government, and these are federal court decisions. they deal with civil rights and constitutional rights. So we definitely pay attention to them, and that's how we try to move forward.
So at this time, before we move into a different section, we can go ahead and, do we have any questions that anyone wants to ask live? Or if not, go ahead, Sandra. We can
Also, just as a reminder, sorry for that
bring you a
abruptness,
microphone.
you can just raise your hand, and we do have runners out here collecting your question cards as well.
I wrote this on the comment card, but I'm just curious, at what point, at what point when you see someone who is unhoused and mentally unstable, at what point do, I don't know, the state or somebody step in to care for this person who is clearly unable to care for themselves that is homeless? If they are unable to even make it to the restroom, to use the facilities. I mean, they're clearly unwell. When does somebody step in to help this person?
So I think we're going to be covering those exact issues here in the next few, so I think I'm going to actually hold on answering that, if you don't mind, until we get through these issues, if that's okay, because I think we might answer some of it with the presentation. Go ahead.
Yes, you had talked a bit about the prison situation and everything. I'm just wondering how many of the people on the streets is estimated to have come from the prison population?
It's in Lakeport, it's not a high number. We do have some that we've encountered that have been on parole from the prison population. I don't have an exact number for you here tonight. It's going to be different in different communities. So that's something that we will try to follow up on a little more. We have a live question over here, Michael.
Wendy Monfrance, Chief Probation Officer. I can tell you in the county there are less than 100 people on probation, on high supervision probation, that are counted as homeless. So it's a very small number.
Thank you, Wendy.
My question is, why isn't the Boise decision challenged as legislating from the bench? It's not the job of the courts to create law, and I just kind of wonder if that has been challenged in any court decision.
Do we have any direct info on that, Bill?
There actually has been quite a bit of that same principle being brought up to the forefront. I believe, in fact, Governor Newsom himself has asked specifically for the Supreme Court to weigh in on some of these decisions that are conflicting with each other, specifically across different areas. And the Boise decision, the most recent grants past one, are one of them. So I mean, it is creating a lot of confusion and demanding it to move forward to the higher court. So it's a good question.
Only have time for one more question for right now, live.
We can do one, two. We can do two real quick.
Okay. Hi there. My question is, when you speak of public land, is there a difference between private property?
Yes.
Okay.
So private property, we have a lot more enforcement ability. And so we can actually get trespass letters from the owners requesting us to enforce. So definitely talk to us about how to do that.
When you're talking about the Boise decision and the Grants Pass decision, the Johnson versus the city of Grants Pass, those were struck down because they were too broad. There are cities like Los Angeles, which is one of the most liberal cities in the state of California, who are currently enacting sit-lie ordinances, but they're not using such broad strokes. They're putting specific requirements on it is that they're outlawing sit-lie in sensitive areas, such as areas close to schools, close to parks, close to libraries, close to daycare centers, underpasses, overpasses, pedestrian walkways. So my question is, why are we not looking at those options? If we could use a liberal city such as Los Angeles, who's not using such broad strokes like Grants Pass and the other in 2005, why are we not looking at those options?
We actually are, and what we're calling is a critical infrastructure ordinance that we are researching right now that would cover a lot of those areas that you're talking about. And it would include public areas as well as private areas like medical facilities and, you know, water treatment facilities, things like that. So we are working on that. Yes.
Am I on now?
Yes.
I'm Marilyn Wakefield. I work with Adventist Health, and I work with many of our most vulnerable neighbors. And I want to remind everyone that these are not homeless people that have migrated here because we have such great services. These are people who grew up here. In the point-in-time count that we did over the last 3 years, more than 85% of the population that we surveyed on the day that we're told to survey by HUD, over 85% of those folks have lived in Lake County or grew up in Lake County for more than 15 years. So these are not, it's because of circumstances. And when we start looking at the courts are interpreting federal law, I would encourage us to always err on the side of compassion, because if that was your sister out there, or your cousin, or your child, I have a child who's been homeless. Not in Lake County, but back where we used to live. And saying that somehow they don't deserve a safe place to sleep when we don't have enough places for people to go shelter overnight, I think is a very cruel way of approaching the problem.
So we're going to have to move on to the next section, but I just want to remind everybody, any questions, we've got some cards that we can't get to because of time. We're going to be personally reaching out to those folks and answering their questions to make sure everybody gets them answered. So, Elise?
Where's the runny one? I hate being tethered to a. Oh, thank you. No, it's not. Oh, in a moment now. Hello. I'm so particular. Okay. Next slide, please. And down one more. So this was an image taken at Willowbrook State School in 1972. And schools and facilities like this continued to be open into the 1980s. Actually, some of you are old enough to remember Gerardo Rivera. You guys remember him, the popular, okay, seeing some nodding heads, good. So he actually did one of a very famous expose into a very notorious institution in New Jersey that ultimately led to its closure. The individuals that you see here are people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, which do represent some people who are homeless. This is also very similar to how we housed or cared for people with mental illness throughout history. So America has a pretty dark history with how we've treated people with mental illness and substance use, and that has resulted in them being marginalized at best, right? And so for a long time, since the inception of America, and really since post-industrial revolution, so we're talking about, goodness gracious, we're talking about the 18 and 1900s, there weren't laws to protect people with mental illness. So if you had a family member and they had a mental illness and you didn't have the capacity to deal with them, you could literally offload them to a facility like this, an asylum, and they would throw away the key. There were no civil rights for people with mental illness. It didn't exist. And so people live like this, and this is a prettier picture, believe it or not. People live like this in squalor and abuse for many years, right, for their whole life. Actually, and we'll get to talking about the timeline of how we've treated people with mental illness and what we've done to care for them a little bit more. But I just want to contextualize this, is that these are human beings' lives. And so when we talk about very important questions like at what point can we intervene, we're very sensitive to that because of our history of denying people civil rights. And so we're seeing a continuum in this pendulum that is swinging. We're back in these times and back in the 18 and 1900s, the pendulum, we didn't have civil rights, all the rights were taken away, right? Next slide, please. So we didn't have a lot of great understanding or treatments for mental illness for a long time. Some of the first medications that really successfully treated illnesses such as schizophrenia, which includes perceiving things that aren't really there. Colloquially, you'll see it in the media all the time, people hearing voices, saying things. Those can be symptoms of schizophrenia. And so in the beginning part of the 1900s, about the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, they began to experiment with various medications that showed real promise for helping people and remediating these symptoms. And so as a result of that, and a recognition that the way we were treating people with mental illness was in violation of their constitutional rights, there was some legislation. And in 1967, the Lanterman-Petrus Short Act was enacted, which laid out very clearly the criteria that you must follow in order to take somebody into care against their will, right? And so we still have that criteria today. We call it the LPS Act in short. And so yes, there are dozens, I would say, of Lake County residents, your neighbors, who actually are on an involuntary commitment in order to make sure that they remain safe. And so some people are on commitment and they live in a state hospital, okay, which is a very, very high level of care. The nearest state hospital is in Napa, right? And then we have ones down further south. We used to have a state hospital in Ukiah, and I'll talk about why we don't have that anymore. So the Lanterman-Petrus Short Act said this is what you have to do. If people are mentally ill and they're unable to care for themselves due to the presence of a mental health condition, you have to follow a process. And it's a judicial process, so we work with the courts, okay? It's all based on a court order that allows us to provide the treatment for them so that they can remain safe and alive. So again, that ended in inappropriate, indefinite, and involuntary commitment. It was also true for a long time that you could also subject your family members to medical procedures against their will. So notoriously, Rosemary Kennedy, who was one of the Kennedys, anybody remember the Kennedy? Okay, thank God. She had a lobotomy. And if you don't know what a lobotomy is, it's basically a procedure where they take something that looks like an ice pick, and they have you are anesthetized for this, okay? But they put it in between your eye socket here, and they kind of scramble it around, okay? And they scramble this part up here, and what it does, or what it had the effect of doing, was definitely decreasing just overall personality and behavior. So people who had previously suffered a lot, they didn't have the capacity to suffer because literally they didn't really have a lot of ability to perceive. So they were very much like vegetables, okay? So they were walking, they were up and at 'em, they were not causing any problems. And so, is that my timer? Oh, good. And so this went on for a long time, and so our history of treating people like this, not to mention a lot of unethical treatment of people of color, our Native American communities, this is all part and parcel of our history and something that we have to be very sensitive to. So we saw a lot of changes, and in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan, the Reagan administration made a decision to close a lot of the state hospitals. And that was in response to the fact that a lot of state hospitals are very unpleasant, abusive, dangerous places, okay? And so on the face of it, it looks like, yeah, absolutely, that's what we need to be doing. We don't want people to languish away in these state hospitals. It's terrible. So what didn't happen, though, is that there weren't enough services to pick up those people who left the state hospitals. They still needed help, right? And so now, unfortunately, in the year 2023, okay, this is, who's good at math? Not me. Thank you. All right. A long time, right? We're still seeing the effects of the closures of the state hospitals. And as a little bit of personal story to the evidence of the kinds of places that these state hospitals were in the past, anybody been to the Buddhist monastery over in Ukiah off of Talmadge? Yeah, City of 10,000 Buddhists, thank you. So that used to be one of our state hospitals. And I actually used to go there and do landscaping. When I was a teenager, they hired me. And one of the monks and I told me, don't dig too deep. And the reason for that was because there are unmarked graves at the state hospital, and this is common, okay? And so these people had no justice, they had no life, they had everything taken from them. And so when you see people on the street who appear to be very mentally ill, and perhaps they are, that's why it's so hard to put these people away against their will and get them help, because we're very scared of taking away people's civil rights. And I understand that you have to strike a balance, and it's clear to me that in society we haven't quite yet figured out that balance between personal liberty and constitutional rights and community and personal safety, and it's very tough and a very nuanced discussion. So that, I hope, kind of answers the initial question that you raised. There are processes in place, and we do have those people, but it's very hard. It's a very high criteria to meet, and perhaps rightly so. So what do we have in terms of mental health services today? And I think I only have 2 slides. Today, I have one more. Let's go to the next one. Okay, perfect. Look at me, I was right on time. So mental health today is a huge multi-billion-dollar system, right? It's part of healthcare, and behavioral health services, if you didn't know, we are contracted with the Department of Health Care Services to provide safety net services. So these are services for Medicaid recipients who have no other means of getting help, right? And so if you meet criteria for our services, you can have it, and we're gonna help you out. A lot of the initiative, well, for example, the 2011 realignment, and Scott, what was the first one? I think he's the expert. So the 1991 realignment. So there's been a couple of pivotal legislative changes that have shaped the current mental health service landscape and tell where the funding goes, right? And ultimately, it does become a question about funding. Now, recently, our state, and I think largely because of efforts of Governor Newsom, have really paid attention to homelessness, and especially the intersection of homelessness with mental illness and substance use disorders, right? Now, show of hands, how many people think that every single person that's homeless has a mental health problem? Okay. In reality, it differs. I'm happy to see that because that isn't the case. However, we do know that if you have a significant mental health issue and or a substance use issue, it's going to make it that much harder for you to regain stability and housing, right? It's really hard. And so that's why in the Mental Health Services Act, and hopefully some of you have also attended some of our Mental Health Services Act stakeholder meetings. That's a really great opportunity to get your voice heard about what you want to see mental health services do. And my friend Scott Abbott here is the program manager for that, and he's great. So we do a lot of work to try to capture what you all want to see in the community, right? And so we are constantly looking at that. There is actually presently legislation that has been, I believe it's been signed off by the governor's office and will appear on the ballot in March. Not quite, okay. It's probably going to, and it's probably going to appear on the ballot in March, but it's the modernization, it's Senate Bill 326, and it's the modernization of the Mental Health Services Act to the Behavioral Health Services Act. And so it also significantly includes a lot of language about homelessness and housing. Now, I think it's pretty obvious that if you are unhoused, it's gonna be very hard to get well. Would everybody agree that if you don't have housing, it's gonna be really hard, no matter what kind of condition you have, to get well? Okay, and so that's why we have had such a focus on housing. I'm also pleased to report that we have more than broke ground. It's actually slated for completion, I think, in the fall of 2023, is the Collier Avenue 24, thank you, Scott, what would I do without him, is the Collier Avenue Housing Project. Now, hopefully you're aware of that. If you're not, if you drive by Collier Avenue in Nice, you'll see it. There's construction there, and that is a permanent supportive living housing project. So what that means is there will be staff on site to provide help to people who are transitioning out of homelessness who have mental illness. We also have various other accommodations. That's a partnership also with a variety of entities, including Redwood Coast Regional Center, recognizing that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities tend to have a harder time maintaining housing. And so that is a 40-unit project, which is incredible. And we'd love to see more of that. There is a lot of grant money available, and some of that grant money is funding the shelter that is currently in operation. It's over at what was known as the old juvenile hall in Lakeport, and I cannot remember exactly how many beds we have. I think we have about 35 beds. Thank you, Scott. He's my facts guy. And so we have 35 beds there. What we know from the pit count is that that's not enough to house all of the unhoused people in Lake County, right? 35 beds is not enough. However, it is more than we ever had previously, and I hate to say this, but you have to thank COVID, because without COVID, we never would have had a shelter, so there is a silver lining in everything. So there are limitations to treatment. So I think that we're doing a pretty good job of behavioral health. Of course, there's always room for improvement, for expanding our services and providing quality services. But one of the things, folks, is that services are voluntary. Does everybody know what voluntary means? Because I can't make you do it. Now, we do have a mental health court, okay, and this is evolving with Care Court, which is another proposal by Newsom's office to further support people who are unhoused and being mentally ill in public. But presently, what we do have is Care Court. So if you have a mental illness and during the course of your mental illness, you happen to commit a crime, such as trespassing, okay? But we determine, or the courts determine, hey, we're thinking that if you were treated for your mental health, you probably wouldn't have done what you did. And so people get the opportunity to participate in services on a voluntary basis. And they can have, if they participate in treatment and they do what they need to do, those charges will be dropped. And so that is presently, that's been going on for years in Lake County. That's been a very strong partnership with our court system. And we also have a drug diversion court as well, so same kind of a thing. So if you've been convicted of crimes related to a substance use issue and you participate in treatment, you have the opportunity to walk away from that and have your charges go away, which is a great opportunity, because one thing that we do know is a criminal record tends to hinder people from getting jobs and rentals and other things that are really important for their recovery, right? So those are efforts that we presently have. Now, of course, as I said, Care Court will further make more robust those efforts, okay? We are gearing up for the rollout of Care Court. We are also gearing up for something that we're very, very excited about, and I'm looking at a couple of wonderful ladies back here. So I hate to do this, but I have my two deputy directors, Ms. April Gambra and Christine Andrus, and they're single-handedly, well, with a lot of people, lifting mobile crisis response. So right now in Lake County, if you were yourself or know somebody who is having a mental health crisis. Now, what is that? You're thinking about killing yourself, killing somebody else, or you're in public unable to care for your basic needs, okay? Or in your home, unable to care for your basic needs to the extent that it endangers your life. That is what we call a mental health crisis. And we do presently have an amazing crisis team that will meet with you, will do their best to resolve the crisis. Sometimes that does require individuals to go to a higher level of care, such as an acute psychiatric hospital, in order to get that treatment that they need. Sometimes it doesn't, but that crisis team actually has been going out and has had strong partnerships, I would say. Big thanks to Chief Rasmussen and also with Clear Lake Police Department Chief Hobbs down there. We do joint response. So if law enforcement encounters somebody in the community that clearly has something going on with mental health, our team will come meet them in the field and talk with that individual and see if we can help stabilize that situation. And I know that further on down the presentation, there's also some other really exciting stuff happening in terms of community response. But mobile crisis is a whole new paradigm. And it takes what we've already been doing, and really ups the ante. So it's going to be us really going into the community and in real time, like you're at your house, and you are having a mental health crisis. You call the number. A team will come to your house. They will have a psychiatrist on a tablet to see you in your home if you want or need that. They will have a therapist either on a tablet or in person. We are also putting in plans for something called the living room. This hasn't been final approved yet, so this is really kind of like cutting edge for us, but it is essentially a place where people can go that isn't a hospital, where they hopefully can stabilize, because what we know about a lot of crises is that it's typically precipitated by psychosocial circumstances. You had a relationship issue, you had something go on at work, okay, your dog, something happened to your pets, that would be a lot, heaven forbid, right? And so that's what typically pushes people over the proverbial edge into crisis. And so if they take a break from that and have a chance to be around supportive people, it's very likely that their symptoms will stabilize and they may never ever have to set foot in an emergency department, which is not, anybody been to an emergency department? God bless them, and thank you so much to our nurses and doctors, but I think we can all agree it's not like the funnest place you've ever been. Okay, so it's similarly not a very pleasant place. Nobody wants to go there, and so we want to offer people experiencing a crisis someplace that feels a little more safe, welcoming, and warming. Not that they don't do a great job, but it's just a mismatch, and we think we could better meet their needs and avoid the hospital altogether. So that's really exciting. It's coming to fruition. I'm sure there'll be more to be said about that. The last thing that I want to highlight is CalAIM, which is short for California Innovating and Advancing Medi-Cal. And essentially what that means is that it's an expansion of services, and it is an effort to have parity between payment for mental and physical health. Now what we know is that the costs of mental health services, despite them being healthcare, has never been compensated at the rate of physical health care. So when people ask for more services, which we need and we want to provide them, it's very hard to support that need with the reimbursement rates that we were getting because it was never recognized as deserving those rates. And so now through CalAIM, I'm happy to report that big steps in the right direction have taken place, and this took a lot of activism not only at the state but also at the federal level to make sure that we could do this. And so our team here is really invested in increasing the services and supports to our community. We understand that Lake County is one of the most underserved counties in California. And I also want you to know that this team has a real investment in this process. So I just want to share with you all that you know, I graduated with my master's degree in developmental psychopathology in 2011, but I did my first semester of college at Mendocino College while I was living in a tent. Okay, and so what we also know is that foster youth, and now I wasn't quite a foster youth, but foster youth represent about 1 in 4 unhoused people on the streets, okay? So when you're talking about people unhoused, those people were kids, right? And so we all have histories, and I think it's really important to recognize that, but through CalAIM, I'm very hopeful that we're going to be able to continue expanding our services and meeting the need that we see is there. Thank you.
Just as a quick reminder also, we are going to have a Q&A at the end, so we are going to do our best to get to every question if we possibly can. And again, to follow up what Brad said, there will be some follow-up after this, so make sure to fill out those question cards and leave your information, and we will follow up.
Does anyone have a live question for Elise? We can take a couple.
When will the mobile clinic or mobile crisis team start? When will those services be started?
January 1. Yes, ma'am.
So as for the services provided, are there any services for the community that can help them be more self-aware and more, aware of these unconscious biases so that they can better understand the homeless culture?
That's a really nice question. Thank you, Richie. So I would this is another plug for mental health first aid because I have been a mental health first aid instructor, and they don't teach this stuff, well, When I was a kid, they didn't teach it in schools, okay? You didn't learn about mental health. You didn't learn about a lot of stuff. And so it's a really amazing opportunity, but I think learning and having an understanding is the first step towards breaking down stigma. And if you didn't know, stigma is negative beliefs about a person, thing, or situation that are based in societal expectations, right? Thank you.
My question is, you did not give us the phone number for the behavioral crisis. If you see someone in a situation, what is the phone number that we call?
Who has that? I know somebody does. I do not have it memorized, and that's a shame. 988. Oh, 988. So have you heard of 988? Yes, it's happening. It's a real thing. So that will be the central dispatch, and that's how we're going to mobilize the mobile crisis. For now, we do have a different crisis line, I believe. It is on our website. Please, you can Google Lake County Behavioral Health Services. There's a crisis line, and there's also a regular daytime line for just accessing or questions.
And we've got one over here, Elise.
Yes.
I wanted to speak about the stigma of mental health or behavioral health. The truth is, it's brain health. If your knee is damaged, you go to an orthoped. You have no shame about that. Your knee's damaged, you get it fixed. Nobody says there's something wrong with you. They have compassion and love and may even help you. People who have behavioral health, mental health, really have brain health issue. And if we start to look at it that way, perhaps medicine will start addressing it that way. The behavior happens because the brain is not functioning properly. And that may be something people were born with. It may be from an accident, it may be from an injury, it may be hereditary. It's a brain health issue. So please, when you think about people who are homeless and may have disorientation, there's something wrong with their brain. They're still a decent human being and need to be treated that way.
My question's about your housing facility that you just are almost completed, and I want to commend you on doing that. But is there any way to create a systemic, continuous building project that will build more and more of these on a continuous level so that we can get this under control in the future?
Thank you for that question. So there are plans to look at housing more broadly as a county and to leverage partnerships, public and private, to stand up housing. I think there's wide recognition and understanding in county leadership that housing is an issue, and there will be a, I think Mariah Turner was here, and so she's, if you didn't know, she's like in charge of housing and a whole bunch of stuff, community development, and so part of her department and a lot of other folks are gonna come together to talk about housing solutions for Lake County. And I also, I think this might be a good chance to just, somebody did ask a question about the warming center and the funding, so that those are grant funds. Those are federal grant dollars through the Housing and Urban Development Commission, otherwise known as HUD, and they're monitored and audited extremely thoroughly. The feds are pretty serious. Have you ever filed your taxes with the IRS? They are very detail oriented, and so same principles apply. There's a lot of auditing over those records. Behavioral health presently maintains administrative oversight and support to the Lake County Continuum of Care, which is a group of individuals who act as a body to make decisions about housing. And if you're interested in the Lake County Continuum of Care, please Google Lake County Continuum of Care. You may attend meetings, they are public, and that is where decisions about these particular housing dollars and projects are made.
Thank you. One more question right here. I don't. Yes, you have a question? You have one up here. Okay, get the one up there and we'll come back to you. Okay, really quickly, we heard about Collier and 40 seats. What I haven't heard yet is, what is the number of homeless in Lake County?
Anybody, Marilyn, can you give the latest PIT count?
Partnership Health, which is our only medical provider in Lake County, estimates that or no, on their data, they said that we have 1,200 people who qualify as homeless according to their records, and that includes children. And in the school system, the last number that I heard is that we have over 500 children who qualify as homeless.
Yeah, we have a situation at the border, and we will be seeing immigrants coming up our way, whether they are illegal or not. And that is going to complicate the whole situation with homelessness. So my question, specific question, is what about priority? The immigrants, the illegals, seem to be getting priority over citizens. So can you address that?
Thank you for that question. What I can say is that anyone who meets the criteria for behavioral health services, as either a child or adult, may access our services regardless of their insurance, immigration status, or ability to pay. I couldn't answer that question specifically because I'm not in charge of housing like that, but there may be somebody else who can.
I think if we can get your contact info, we'll get a better answer for that. That's going to be a difficult one to answer right now.
Yes.
Okay, next slide, please. So Elise briefly mentioned the Care Court. Care Court is the new mental health program that's supposed to be coming out here pretty soon, I believe at the first of the year. It's been running in a couple of test counties right now. But basically, what that is going to give an ability for certain qualified organizations or providers to be able to try to get somebody into the system to where the court can order some kind of a treatment plan. We don't yet have that in Lake County. What we do have is the mental health court that she mentioned. And just real briefly on that, that is where if an individual is charged, they can file a petition with the court that they have mental illness and that the mental illness that they have was a factor in the crime that was committed. And if the judge agrees with that, he can set them up on a mental health program and basically pen the criminal case for if they complete that mental health program. And then they wouldn't get charged with that crime. If they fail to go through with their treatment, then the district attorney can bring the case back to court. There's another thing called competency proceedings, which is still different yet. And that is where the DA has charged somebody with a crime and they're alleging, or their defense attorney is alleging, that they weren't competent to commit that crime. So then it has to go through a process where the judge could send that person off to a hospital and see if competency can be restored. And if it can't, they would be returned to be prosecuted. If not, they could be kept in that mental institution for only the amount of time that they could have been sentenced on a conviction for that crime. So if we're talking about a misdemeanor, that's going to be like 60 days only. If we're talking about a felony, it could be up to a year or so. Next slide, please. And the other thing that really comes into our ability in the city of Lakeport to appropriately address our response to the crime issues, as well as the trying to respond to and address the issue with the unhoused population as well, is our staffing. It's, for the last 2 years, we've been running at a 48% reduction in staffing, and that was because we cannot, it's very difficult to recruit people into this county. And, you know, we have a percentage of officers that get trained and then they leave to a higher paying jurisdiction. So with those factors, it kept us running about 48% down. Our city council last fall in November of 22 did authorize a new recruitment and retention program that was meant to try to help us keep officers here on the street. There were things like bonuses being paid, also bonuses being paid to our own officers that could recruit other officers here, flexible hiring to where if somebody came to us and we only had a police officer opening, but they were qualified to be a sergeant, I could hire them as a sergeant and pay them at a higher rate, even though I was already full on sergeants. So those were some of the things we did to try to get staffing back. And at this point, we are now at about 110% staffing. We're actually overstaffed because the council gave us money to overhire what budget allowed, because that way we know we lose 1 to 2 a year, we'd still be staffed with that person when we lost somebody. So it's kind of a temporary overstaffing. But that still doesn't equal full staffing on the street because it takes a year to train a police officer. So we've got, 2 officers in the academy that'll graduate in December and still need 4 more months of training. We got 2 people in field training that still need another month or 2. So that's 4, and we got a couple of officers that are off on medical leave, so that's 6, so I'm still 48% down to be able to respond to things on the street. Now, we're hoping that that's all going to improve by May of next year when everyone finishes training. So that's been difficult, to address all the issues we have to address because of those staffing things. And we're also responding to the crime issues as well as the non-criminal to address the unhoused population with our crisis response program. And next slide, please. So one of the things that the community can help us with is on our website. If you go to lakeportpolice.org, go to our community portal over on the left side of the page, you can go in there and find a thing called Directed Patrol Request. That's where you can email us in information. There's a little form there. If it's not an emergency where you need a police officer to respond right now, but something you want addressed, send us a form there. It'll get emailed to us and we'll assign it out to have somebody follow up on. We really want to be more visible in the downtown corridor on foot. That's important to me. My ultimate goal is if we get to, and there was a question submitted about that, the plan is once we get to May with the staffing increased, I would assign 1 officer to work full-time on foot patrol downtown to cover the parks and Main Street. And that would be their only job in that area. So we're trying to get to that. That's going to, I think, alleviate a lot of our issues having an officer down there that can build relationships, get to know the business owners, get to know all the people we're interacting with, and trying to make positive change. Next slide, please. Crisis intervention and de-escalation, that has been a big deal throughout the United States with law enforcement for the past few years. As everyone knows, there's been a lot of negative situations where police in other parts of the country have really committed some serious crimes and not handled situations the way they should. And now there's mandates about that crisis intervention de-escalation. Here in Lakeport, we were actually training on that several years before those incidents ever happened. We were already working towards that. It's a lot of training, and it's another thing that hampers our cops from being on the street. We have massive training mandates where they have to go out of town to school, and they also have to do training online every day in some form. So that does take them off the street. And then the crisis intervention and de-escalation. our mandates now when we're dealing with people that are in crisis, and you see them, there's examples of those folks on our street who are in a crisis, whether it's due to mental illness or drug addiction, and we have to try to work with them to get them through that crisis and figure out what the right resource is, what the right course of action is, whether it's making an arrest or bringing in behavioral health or our crisis responder. And I know it frustrates the community because many times it looks like we're not doing anything. But, you know, there's a lot of mandates and ways that we have to deal with these situations to make sure that we're doing it appropriately. So, but again, I think if we can get to where we're more present in these high-profile areas, that's going to help. And next slide, please. And I'd like to bring up Lisa Morrow. Actually, and Elise and Kevin are all going to be part of this slide here. So Lisa Morrow, she's the executive director of the Lake Family Resource Center. And she is the agency who provides our crisis responder that we've talked about. So back in July of, I believe it was 21, that I reached out to her to see if we could partner with them to provide a type of a social worker to ride with the police officers, to work with the unhoused population, as well as the persons who are having mental illness and addiction issues, to try to move them into treatment programs, to try to move them into appointments, and try to get them off the street, try to get them into programs to get them housed. And it's been extremely successful in the past few years. And Lisa, would you like to add a few short words about that?
You pretty much covered it. And thank you for that. And I just wanted to say that I so very much appreciate our partnership with the Lakeport Police Department. Our fantasy is that someday we will have crisis responders in every set of law enforcement in Lake County, including the Sheriff and Clear Lake Police Department. It does come down to money and funding. So be on the lookout, and if you can support, please do. Alicia Adams here is my staff. Raise your hand, Alicia. She is our responder and is led by a pretty wonderful group of people as well. So just wanted to acknowledge that is happening. She's one person, that's all it is. She has a program of one, supported by a team of over 60. So any questions around that, feel free to ask them, but we just want to build it and make it bigger. So,
thank you, Lisa. The next thing I want to mention is, Elise mentioned the mobile crisis response, but we're actually going to go further than that. I'm working with her agency right now to house a licensed clinical social worker in the police department to be available to respond to calls with Alicia and our police officers. And we're hoping to have that in place in the next month or two. Before I have you mention housing services, Kevin, I want to mention some situations where we've been very successful with the crisis responder. One situation we had where we had a homeless female on the street that the officers were very proactively working with and contacting. They were able to get her to accept help, and we got her connected. She's off the street. It's been months, and she's in a better situation, not on the street causing issues. We also have two situations where we had two people that were affected pretty severely by mental illness, and the amount of calls that we had per person was well over 100. They were affecting the business district with a lot of the things that were happening. We had many arrests with them, which didn't work because of the issue with the misdemeanors. They get arrested, get out of jail, there's no accountability. We moved on to getting them connected with behavioral health services. working with Elisa's department and our crisis responder, and those two individuals now are in facilities and have been for several months, and they are going to move on to what I believe is conservatorship status, and they're being taken care of. They're not down in our community. Those are two more significant ones. And then the last situation back in May and June of this year, we had a female young lady that was in our town. She was homeless, addicted to methamphetamine, numerous calls for service about her activities downtown, numerous interactions with police officers. Because of our officers, along with Alicia's repeated work to work with her, we were able to get her off the street into a drug treatment facility where just last week she made it through the 90 days. She graduated drug-free. I have her here tonight. She is going to tell her story. If you can come up here.
Hi, there's a lot of people here. I'm a little nervous. I'm Misty. So I'll start with just a few months ago, I was in a psychosis. I couldn't speak to you like I am today at all. I couldn't carry on a conversation with you. I was on the streets of Lakeport, had a lot of police contact. I'm sure they said I was generating calls. I can't believe that there wasn't more because it was pretty bad. I was constantly in the street, the middle of the street, falling asleep anywhere. I was using methamphetamine. Prior to that, I was using for about 9 years. Prior to that, I was a foster parent, and I was doing family unification with child welfare, and I had it together a little bit. I went from being in foster care to doing foster care, and then when I started using meth, I instantly went into psychosis. So with the coexisting, or I don't know exactly how you say it, disorders, I couldn't really care for myself. I had a beautiful 3-bedroom house. I ended up walking around downtown with no shoes on until obviously I lost that. I was in and out of hospitals a few times, and I just sort of isolated to myself, and the only real contact I had was either with officers or people that were just like, get away, you know. There's a few people that really did try to help me, but I then ended up getting in some trouble in 2016, and I tried to do a program, and Proposition 47 left me, my felony dropped down to a misdemeanor, and so the funding fell through, and so I was like, yay, I don't have to do a program at that point. And so I returned to the streets, and then I pretty much stayed actively using until these last few months. And when I was in Lakeport on the street, originally the mobile crisis team, I don't know if that's what they're called, they have like this little van, they originally reached out to me, and some people in Kelseyville, and they introduced me to the warming shelter, where I was able to sort of find some sort of support where I could interact with people and be able to sleep there. So I was sort of coming into like a stable place in my psychosis, I guess, where I was able to care for myself and stuff. And I ended up going to a mental hospital in February, and because I was able to find housing, I was released. And so I wasn't really getting any better because I was still using methamphetamine. And so I was still out here in the community, just eating where I could, sleeping where I could, garbage cans. It gets pretty bad. But then I got arrested, and I went to jail. And when I got out, I wanted to try. I had gotten a few days clean, and so I was starting to come out of the psychosis. And I really wanted to be good, but I couldn't really, because I was still out there homeless. And so I guess I can't say couldn't, but I kept using, and so I think that's when a lot of the calls were being made. And one day, an officer brought Alicia Adams to where I was, and I know that they didn't have to because I was on parole at the time, and I could have easily went to prison rather than getting the help that I got. I've since then gotten off parole, but just even being under the influence, I could have easily been taken to jail. And instead, he brought Alicia Adams, and they asked me, did I want to go to a program? And at the time, I definitely wanted to go to a program. And So I said yes, and I was terrified. And so I thought it would be a period of time. But the next day, they said meet me at the warming shelter or out by the warming shelter. So the very next day, I was out. I waited for them, and he brought again Alicia. Just like took the time out of their day to come all the way out to the warming shelter, and they walked me through this interview to Thule House, where I went and was at for 3 months, which they were so welcoming and so amazing. And when I got there, I remember the staff was like, well, I don't know if she's going to make it, because they thought maybe I needed a higher level of care. But I think Alicia was able to assess me and see that it was mostly just a drug-induced psychosis. And so she was able to get me in there. And over the course of the 3 months, I kept thinking, how am I ever going to repay them? How am I going to thank them? And so the more time at Thule House, I kept thinking, well, I'm going to send them a card or something. But then I saw them at an event, and I was like, thank you. And so I reconnected with Alicia, and I called her to ask her if she knew of any housing resources, like lists or something like that. And she went above and beyond. Since then, she's got me into temporary housing and connected with Behavioral Health, whom is going to help me with housing as well as counseling. And well, I mean, as you can see, I really couldn't talk to you. So just the support that I've gotten since then, I don't know how to say thank you for. And so I'll be moving into more permanent housing somewhere in the community. And I'm also going to get my GED, my driver's license, possibly be looking for work. And I'm not on medicine or on at this time. I did it all with just the help of Alicia and the officers in Behavioral Health. So I just want to say thank you for everything and for seeing me as an individual. So thank you. Oh, and I have some friends that they've helped too. So, I mean, it really is working. It's not just me.
Thank you, Misty, for sharing your story, and I really appreciate the community being willing to listen and showing her support. I think you can see from a lot of the things we talked about tonight that us continuing to arrest her repeatedly wasn't going to fix the problem. But now, because of the work we're putting into it, because of those programs, she is in housing and she is sober. And then, any questions on this section before we move on? We'll bring you a mic. Where are you?
Coming down? Okay. I'll meet you right here. All right. How's that sound?
Thank you. I am a daughter. I am a sister. And I'm like you, middle class, and I found myself homeless in this community and had quite a different situation happen. Last year, I befriended some homeless people, not realizing I'd soon be homeless myself, and was told by someone very respected in this community that the county had a $50 million surplus. I happened to tell a homeless person that because I had a heart for the homeless that were on the shores of Clear Lake. That person went before some council. I had left town, had come back, and was told that the warming center was given to them. My situation going to the warming center was quite different. About a few months ago, I went there, and my former husband was a correctional officer at San Quentin. And I can tell you, in the early 90s, San Quentin was far nicer than that place. I can say the common rooms are pretty nice, but when I was taken back to one of the bedrooms, the floors were sticky. There was a bag of garbage. There was stuff on the floor. There was a toilet taped over. There was a broken record on the floor. I couldn't stay in that room more than 2 hours, and I got up, and I once again drove away. But I don't know if you know that if you became homeless, there's not many resources for you if you're like me. If I do not claim a dependent, if I do not say I'm disabled, there is a program that I didn't find out from the people that should have told me that you have 90 days to get paid about $270 in this county, in Sonoma County, $172 a month, along with food stamps, along with your medical. But I don't know about you. I can't live on $172 and get gas and find a job. So I just want you to not rest on your laurels with what's going on here in this town or in the warming center, because I could tell you quite a different thing. And as far as bringing solutions, I did. I went down to Santa Rosa today because in Sonoma County, they pretty much have it dialed in on how to deal with homeless. I keep coming back here because I love the community, and it's beautiful, and I love the people here. And I owe this community. That being said, I did bring resources. There is a place called the Living Room in Sonoma County. There is a place called the Wellness Advocacy Center. These are day programs, but I can tell you night programs that we have an issue if you have an animal like a dog. And I know for some of you, your dog is your family. And one thing I love about the warming center, they do welcome dogs. And I'm glad we have a warming center, but we have a far away place to go. And I think there's money to be had. And another issue with the money, a lot of it's given to Catholic charities, and Catholic charities did help me here. But talking to the women at the Living Room in Sonoma County, we found out that who gets that money is sort of a mystery. And I think our government, our California, which is the 6th largest economy in the world, should owe it to us to get us off our feet if we find ourselves in this situation, which many of you are one medical situation, or like they said, one paycheck away from my situation. So thank you.
First, I just want to thank Kevin and Chief for putting on this. I don't know Elise, and I'm not sure what you were involved in, but I appreciate everybody having this community outreach today. I'm that guy that got in the fight 2 weeks ago in front of my business. Somebody walked down the street yelling and screaming at me, and we ended up on the scrapping. Last thing I expected, I haven't had a fight since I was 18 years old. I'm 70 years old now. But it had been going on for a couple of days, and to know that, first of all, your response and the response of your team was absolutely amazing, and the response of our community was amazing. This wasn't one of those times when, an old guy's getting a scrap and they're taking pictures of us. People ran across the street from the Gaslight Grill and from down the street to separate everybody and protect me. I'm very grateful for this community and the way people responded in the days that followed what happened. And Chief, what you did to help me get through all of that was way over and above the needs, and I'm very, very personally grateful for everything you did for me.
Thank you.
But it wasn't the first time that we had this problem. Earlier this year, I had to have you come down to my office because there was somebody screaming and yelling outside my window and throwing beer cans at cars that went by. And he was having a break. He didn't know where he was, what he was doing, and the way your men handled that situation. They could have hurt him, they could have done a lot, and they were so gentle in the way they approached this person who was going through this event. I was amazed that they had that much patience, and I was amazed that they'd been trained to be able to treat somebody who was in that situation the way they did. We're really lucky in this community. I mean, we have our problems, and I know that when we have a police officer that's able to get down on Main Street or out in the parks, it's going to get better, and I really appreciate that. That'll go a long way to making things safe on Main Street. And with the warming shelter the way it is, these folks have to leave at 8:30 in the morning. They have no place to go. They can go in the park, or they can walk up and down Main Street or somewhere, but they're stuck. And I know that's, and I'm not sure how you're going to address that. I think it's October, the end of October, that it'll become a 24-hour shelter, if I'm not mistaken.
That's yet to be determined, but that's the hope.
Well, I just want to thank you for everything that you're doing. And
thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Can I talk now? Hey, how's it going? I just want to thank everybody for being them and being here tonight.
I don't really know what homelessness is because I consider myself home free. I don't understand why human beings have to pay to live on this planet, and because of that fact, we've ruined it for a lot of other species. If all lives are sacred and all opinions matter, you know, my opinion is that I don't want money, didn't need money, never wanted it. So why do I have to live in a system where I have to have that? Why can't we work for self causes? Why can't we have a community? Why is this all this separation, pointing fingers? You should see what I have to go through on the streets as a street kid. I've been to 43 states. I've been all over this country. I've been dealing with it with a long time. I'm sick of hearing people screaming out their cars at me or telling me this, telling me that. Go here, kid. Go there, kid. Do this, kid. Do that, kid. I find it very disrespectful in a lot of ways. All I do is try to help people pick up trash around this community. I don't have any identification. I don't have a dollar. I don't have a food stamp card. I don't have nothing. I can't make it to any of my dates. I don't have nothing. I've been wearing the same clothes. I can't go to the warming shelter. I'm sick of this shit. Excuse my language. I apologize. But push came to shove for me a long time ago. Federal Reserve ain't even a part of this government. Money, more problems. You guys all remember that. If we don't get rid of money, we will never solve any problems for humanity. If we don't combine people and have free-range human beings and stop grocery lines and barcodes and everything that we're being charged, God put us here. So if God put us here, put all the animals here, why are we being charged to be here?
Well, I appreciate
like
you
to know.
sharing your story, and I think that the reason we're here tonight is to engage with the community and, you know, work together to resolve the issues that are affecting our community. We can, is there any other? You got one here, hang on. We can take this one here, and we're gonna have to move into the next section.
Hi, my name is Sage Wolf. I'm the Director of Integrated Health with Redwood Community Services. Really appreciate the conversation that's happening today and the approach that's being taken and the concerns around the safety of the folks in the community and both the people who live on the street and the people who are housed in the community. So Redwood Community Services, well, the Lake County Continuum of Care to address homelessness, put out the request for proposals for an operator for what's been called the warming shelter, but really is going to be transitioning into a more robust emergency shelter / housing focused shelter project. And Redwood Community Services did apply for that, and we were awarded that contract. So it's a roughly 2-year, thank you. I'm super excited because personally homelessness and taking care of our folks who have been so often thrown away and spat on and shat on and really, you know, have had the experiences like we've heard so far today, those are very much my people. So I'm really excited to be getting the opportunity to support this shelter here. And so I want to just update you with a few things that I think might be helpful information. The transition period between the current operator and Redwood Community Services is going to take a couple of months. We're going through a hiring and staff recruitment process and staff training, providing staff with the appropriate de-escalation training, crisis communication training, trauma-informed care. These are really important things to have a strong emergency shelter and strong program that can be really supportive of the folks that are being served. So it's going to take us about 2 months before that transition can, well, I say 2 months. I'm really optimistic. So I'm going to go further out a little bit and go like 2 months and 3 weeks before we officially are like transitioning over to Redwood. It will be a 24-hour-a-day facility. So there will not be a requirement that people leave during the day. People are welcome to come and go. That'll be part of the process. One of the biggest things there is people literally have bodies, right? We have to put them somewhere. And I know in this work, one of the things that I run into the most when talking to folks about the thing of you can't be here, you can't be on the sidewalk here, you can't be in the park here, you can't be wherever that spot is that is being problematic in some ways. there isn't a good answer to the question that they often come back with, which is, where should I go? This shelter in Lakeport is not an answer for every single person of where should I go. It can be an answer for the people. We're starting with 35 beds and we'll be doing that. I think the space has room for more than that. There's going to be some questions around if we can increase the capacity. You know, there's funding questions and staffing questions, and how do you, when you increase the number of people you have in the space, you have to be taking into consideration safety and support services. So it won't be an answer for everybody for where can I go, but it will be an answer for that group of people. So one of the things that I encourage the community as you're like thinking through these problems is rather switching gears to answering the question, where can I go? And I think there's a lot of work happening there around housing, because housing is, a shelter is actually not even the answer to where should I go. Because there's all sorts of reasons why forcing people into shelter is really, shelters are, I don't know if you've stayed in one, it's not the greatest environment to stay in. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. They are places where they're hard, they're rough. And I don't blame anybody who says, if I was offered a shelter bed, I don't blame the people who say, yeah, no, sorry, that's not for me. Because it really is not for everybody. Housing. So really excited to hear the projects that are happening around housing. So, yep, I could talk a lot about homelessness, so I just appreciate the time. Thanks.
As someone who lives on Main Street and then has a business on Main Street, I totally understand you guys. The law enforcement is completely understaffed, and I am so aware of that. And I'm so bad I don't remember your name, but I'm super happy to hear that there's going to be something that is happening in May. There's a lot of information that I just absorbed, so I'm trying to keep it all straight. And then you said there's going to be something happening in the next month where we're going to be able to reach out with maybe social workers or whatnot. But in the meantime, because I find myself sometimes calling for the same person over and over, and it doesn't really require police response, I just need a little help dealing with the situation. Could we possibly come up with like a neighborhood watch or something like that, where like citizens could like help the officer, help the community in becoming proactive instead of just sitting back and calling you guys over and over for the same person? Can we do something to help you guys in our little community?
I think that a neighborhood watch of sorts of the downtown business district is actually a great idea. And together we could come up with some plans on how to work that. But you know, they mentioned this mental health first aid class. It's open to anyone in the community to take. I just took the class a couple weeks ago, and anyone that wants to learn more like yourself, I highly recommend. You know, and that would help as we build some kind of a neighborhood group like that. Yeah.
Substance use and suicidal ideation. So one of my partners is here, over there. We are certified instructors in teen mental health first aid. It is rather rigorous. I'm not going to candy coat it. It's 8 hours. So it's not like, you know, I'm just going to drop in and I'm going to learn this and I'm going to be, I'm going to be certified and I'm going to go out there and help everybody. It's not that, but there are flyers out there. So as Brad, it is fun. It is fun. It is fun. We try to make it as fun as possible, but it's not something you're going to go into for an hour and then exit. So it's great information.
Do we have a question up here before we move on? Go ahead.
Hey, Brad. Well, first, I'm a high school teacher. I teach 21st century skills, one of my classes, and I would love to have you come in and teach my class, the first aid, mental health first aid, I think it was. So please come in and do that. I am all about that. I have a couple questions. Now, we were quoted earlier that we have over 1,200 people who are homeless in Lake County. Now, if I'm correct, that is based on the number of people who are actually homeless outside, living in the streets, along with people who may be couch surfing, people who are cohabitating, not the traditional homeless that we think of as traditional homeless. That 1,200 number is a total figure for all those people.
Yes, that's true, Tim.
Okay, thank you. What do I have here? So I've heard multiple times throughout the evening from different speakers that we have some homeless out there who are unable to care for themselves, who are unable to find food and clothing and housing. That sounds to me like they might need more help put on them in an involuntary manner. If you can't feed yourself, clothe yourself, house yourself, how can we expect for those people to make the best decisions for their own mental health and well-being and the well-being of those around them? I have the utmost respect for what you guys are doing, first and foremost. All you guys out there trying to affect a change, actually boots on the ground doing the work, you're awesome. I do have some other stuff, though, what am I looking at here? What are we putting in place? Because we know that substance abuse can very often lead to homelessness. It goes hand in hand. What are we doing in the community to get more substance abuse information out there? How many open beds do we have in a rehab? Do we have rehabs in Lake County? Where do we ship people off who need to go to rehab? Because to me, if we can look at the root, and this is one of the many routes. I mean, I'm not saying it is the only route by any means, but it's a pretty big route. What are we doing to combat that one?
All right.
Your turn.
Thank you. I appreciate that question. And let me try to unpack it a little bit here. So it's actually true that there are a percentage of people in this room who have a substance use disorder right now. I hear you, Sage. No, I think it's like, yes, preach. And so these are parents, these are teachers, these are citizens, these are not all unhoused people. So substance use disorders don't discriminate. They are equal opportunity, okay? And not every single person who is homeless has a substance use disorder or a mental health issue, right? And so the claim that substance use disorders lead to homelessness is empirically not true. What leads to homelessness most of the time is socioeconomic, an inability to maintain yourself socioeconomically. So people who tend to be more affluent tend to be insulated from the negative impacts of their substance use more so than people who are poor. And so if you can buy your way out of things, you are insulated from the negative consequences. And so that's what I would encourage you to reflect upon. Thank you for that. So a little bit, I don't want to go on too much about substance use disorder services, but there is quite a lot happening in that space. And so Lake County Behavioral Health Services does provide substance use disorder services. This can range from outpatient counseling sessions all the way into inpatient withdrawal management, where you literally have to have medical professionals supervise you to withdraw off of drugs because there is a chance of death in some cases. And so Presently, there are 2 different systems in place in California through which these services can be provided and reimbursed through Medicaid. One of them that we belong to is called the Drug Medi-Cal system. It's your basic system, and it provides several levels of care, including outpatient treatments and some forms of residential treatment. That includes to pregnant and parenting women. Those are always included in services, and we do have one of our wonderful residential providers, Tully House. I know Laura Sullivan here oversees that program, and you just heard from one of their beneficiaries, which is amazing. So that's an example of some of the work being done. There are also a lot of services for people who Medi-Cal doesn't pay for their beds, and actually behavioral health has leveraged grant funding for many years to pay for beds when Medi-Cal won't, for everybody who wants it. And so one of our, we have a few providers in Lake County. One of them is Hilltop Recovery. I don't want to do anybody. We have a lot of providers. We have a lot of contracts. And so what we also recognize is that's not enough. So there is another system that's coming into place, and it's been approved by the federal government. It's called the Organized Delivery System. And what it essentially means is an expansion of Medi-Cal reimbursable services. So where we were leveraging grant funding to pay for placements, we will actually be able to bill Medi-Cal for an expanded array of benefits. And so, yes. So we are aware that that is a need, that there is more treatment, and California and Lake County Behavioral Health is gearing up to join the Organized Delivery System effective July 1, 2024. We are currently developing our implementation plan that has to be approved by the federal government. This is layers of bureaucracy. That is how it works. And so we expect to be able to offer those services to our beneficiaries next year. And as of now, I can't tell you an exact count on all of the number of beds. However, I would love to be able to connect with you offline, and I'm sure that we have the ability to provide you that information.
Hi, my name is Noemi Duhan. I'm the new public health officer of Lake County. And I'm here with some of my colleagues from the public health department. This has been an incredible presentation. I just want to congratulate the community and all the panelists for an incredible, educational, important night. My question is about encampments. So our governor has definitely created many of the opportunities we're discussing today, CalAIM, you know, the funding that we have, and it looks like he's really signaling that encampments are going to, you know, that there's going to be a push towards what he calls, what does he call it? Resolution. He calls it encampment resolution. So there's encampment resolution funds now, and I'm wondering from the panel what your thoughts are about encampments and whether you've been kind of sensing this push from the governor around disbanding encampments. And I think the direction of that is that we should be putting people into housing from those encampments. So just wondering what the thoughts are.
Real quick, because we got to get to the last section with the city manager, but we've been working on taking down encampments for the last several years. We have very few here now because we've gone in there and we've worked with those people to offer them services, and then we have removed those encampments. So that's our current policy, and we are following what the state's doing.
That, you know, problems that people have sitting here, right? That was brought up. The question I have is what can be done with our public parks? What can be done about the needles being found? What can be done about the public indecency? What can be done about the public intoxication and the presentable dangers to our children who are trying to play at the public parks? We are finding needles. We are seeing people. A few weeks ago, a month ago, a gal was right by the toddler park and started stripping naked. I feel bad for these people, but I do have concerns for the safety of our children in this community. I don't think they need to be seeing what they're seeing, and I don't think we should have to worry about these things in a downtown area such as Library Park or the museum area. And I believe there's more people out there that are concerned with it and want to know what they can do. Like neighborhood watches were brought up, or what can be done when we see somebody so intoxicated that they don't know where they are and they're yelling at my child, because that's happening and it's not okay. And
we can make a
The problem I have with the drug use is there's something very bad going on out there, and people are using it often because it's in most drugs now, and that's fentanyl. If my child finds that needle that has that substance on it, it could be fatal right then and there. And these people are allowed to hang out all day long, and they're using that substance in the parks. And those are my questions, those are my concerns.
Yeah, so those are all criminal violations if they're using drugs in the park, if they're intoxicated, if they're exposing themselves indecently. We should be called and we should be making arrests on those situations. It doesn't mean that they're going to be in jail for any amount of time, but we can still hold them accountable with an arrest for those violations. I can only speak for the parks in Lakeport, but I know our Public Works is cognizant and are watching out for needles. I haven't heard that they're still finding them today or yesterday, but I know it's something that's on our radar. So those points are well taken. We need to respond and hold those people accountable for those violations and address those in the parks.
Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know we're getting pretty close to the end of our time period here. We will stick around and be able to answer some questions up front. But I did want to kind of try and, you know, as you guys are leaving here, I hope the one major takeaway that everybody is taking with them is this is a really complex situation. There is no one answer. There are some fantastic programs that we've heard about, and you know, we want to continue to move those forward, to put even more staff in there, more resources, and make them go about. We have a bunch of other things that we'd like to do as well. But each of these situations that we're encountering is very different. It takes a different approach, and we're constantly trying to do that piece. I think it also came through very clear this evening, too, that there are a couple of different factors we're looking at. One is we have to, in some ways, treat the condition, but we need to be proactive in preventing some of these negative behaviors. And I think that was exhibited very clearly in regards to some of the last couple questions that we had. And that's not always black and white. That's not easy to do. It's going to take a very concentrated effort on the part of everybody that's up here on the panel. But I'm going to get to the hard part right here, too. It's going to take everybody in this room. And I'm very happy to hear that there are a lot of people raising their hands and they want to be involved in this process. And I would encourage you on those cards as you take them, if you are interested in participating in more of a neighborhood watch type group or activating a greater kind of community council of sorts to address this issue head on and kind of look at bringing the community back into our community, then please put your name on those cards. We will be in contact with you. We never thought that we were going to solve this problem all this evening in a 2-hour block of time. So with that, too, we've been taking lots of notes up here. I think the idea is obviously that we want to have future presentations. I think I've been writing down feverishly, and I'm sure other people have as well. Some of the other perhaps future sessions that we want to take a look at is, some greater introduction to our various community partners so that you're aware of some of the services that are out there. Maybe something specific in regards to substance abuse use services. Another one that we know is very effective is the concept of crime prevention through environmental design. Looking at how cameras, lighting, securing trash enclosures, some mundane things that you don't think of posting the municipal codes on your business locations or in different areas so that law enforcement and other partners have an easier time enforcing those muni codes. It seems like it's redundant or not needed, but it is. It makes the process move a little bit closer. You know, Chief has been looking at specific legislation in regards to working with some of our shop owners with grocery carts specifically. Something as simple as posting the code sections in the correct place on the cart allows us to go after and retrieve those carts, bring them back to the rightful property owners, and help address these issues, you know, more head on. So there's a lot of real tangible efforts out there that we're taking a look at. We are going to put all this information online, and like has been mentioned a few times, any questions that we were not able to get to this evening, we are definitely going to be reaching out to those individually. We do want to kind of bring attention to a number of different services that are also out there. It was briefly mentioned at one point that so for greater ease of enforcing trespassing related issues, you need to have an annual letter on file with the police department. We have templates for those procedures. We have those up online. We want to get that information out to help address these issues head on as well. Another tool that we have is the additional patrol requests. That's kind of a piece that I think is underutilized and helps us kind of identify some of these hot spots where additional services need to be provided. And we are actively working forward with a more easy to use kind of app-based reporting system where you can kind of put these things in real time. Sandra, I know you've brought some great ideas to our attention that we've been putting and implementing. If we can get those, quicker and faster, we can be more attentive to those issues. Not every reportable issue is going to get a police response there in a 5-minute period, but that doesn't mean that they aren't important and they don't need to be addressed. So we need to have those listed, and if we're not aware of them, we can't address them. And we also know that we need to make it very easy for everybody in this room and in our community to report those efforts. So you have our commitment that we're going to continue to do that as well. But I think mainly it's, I want to leave with that message that it is a community-based approach. These partnership agencies are doing a lot of great things, but they're very dependent upon your assistance as well. Tips on, hey, we came across this individual, they really do look like they need help. Getting us involved in that effort speeds the transition up. So one last program that we are working on is the concept of a navigation center in our community. One of the major issues that we've ran into is, as Elise alluded to, these are all voluntary programs. And we can come in and have contacts with folks and have 50, 60 responses and they'll tell us no, they don't need any help, they don't need assistance. But then all of a sudden, they say they do. And we need to be quick on that. And that's very hard to do in a rural community with not a lot of resources. If the mobile crisis unit is over on the other side of the lake dealing with issues there, and we have somebody ready to go here, it becomes very difficult to hold that person's attention before we lose them again, and then we're back to square one of having to offer services 50 more times. A navigation center is an opportunity to kind of bridge that gap where we can have a safe place for folks to be. It can include housing. It can include some safe areas for those that are living in their vehicles to park. And it also allows us, an opportunity. I think there was a question earlier about, well, there are communities that are out there that are doing things that are in response to the Martin versus Boise situation. We can get more surgical in our response to these things, and a navigation center may be one of those approaches where we can take them from, hey, if they're hanging out at the bus station, that's not the best place for them to be. If they're hanging out at Library Park, that's not the best place for them to be. But without a physical location for them to be, that tool generally is not available to us right now. That's not a quick solution. I think the mobile crisis units have a lot more immediate tangible use, and we're glad to see those grow and support their use. But I think, some of these other longer-term solutions, we have to start on the ground floor with some of those things as well. The city is right now, we've got a request for proposal looking for a consultant to help us with the needs assessment portion of that. How much is this facility going to cost? How many units should it have? What kind of services should be available? Where should it be located? These are all items that are going to be coming out in the very near future, and we absolutely need the community support in making sure that it's a facility that actually addresses the issues that we're facing. So I don't want to go too much further than that. I know that we're getting late in the evening. Please write down your names if you want to be contacted for future events. We'll put together some other issues. We'll put all this information online so it's there, and then I think certainly we're going to be here to answer some additional questions if you've got them as you're leaving as well. Thank you very much for attending. This was a very great event. Thank you.
Kevin, excuse me. I just want to say thank you, Brad, for calling us for our assistance in putting together this event. The Soper East Theater is proud to have been a part of this, and will be proud to continue to be a part of it as a resource for you to have events that include the entire community. We are the community theater, and we want to thank you for the efforts that you've had here. I want to acknowledge that this is a first step of many. It's not an easy problem to solve, but empathy and caring for the community, and that includes all the community, is a part of the process. So I want to thank you, Kevin and Brad and all the people who've spoken.
Hello, hello.
Hi, so first of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you who have been here and talked about mental health, and I want to commend Misty for all of her hard work. She said it wasn't only her. I think your name was it Misty? And it is truly only you, because if you didn't take that first step, none of these people would have been able to help you. So just a little bit of my backstory. My parents were homeless when I was born in 1970. My dad was an alcohol and drug addict until I was 16 years old. So I understand the issues a lot that are going on right now. I think what the gentleman was trying to say back there was that we understand the needs of people that are in mental health crisis. And we're not condemning, we're not judging those people. What we're asking for is help to deal with the people that aren't in mental health crisis. I have lived in Lakeport since 2013. I have been coming to Lakeport since 2010. There was a time when I felt safe walking the streets of Lakeport. I don't feel safe anymore. I don't feel safe going out. We're accosted when we walk early in the mornings. And it's not by people who are in mental health crisis. It's by people who are in drug addiction or alcohol crisis. We see them in the parks. They're there every day. They're intoxicated. They're smoking marijuana. There doesn't seem to be any desire to respond or deal with those types of situations. That's what I feel like the community is in crisis from. And again, I say, people that are in mental health crisis, we understand them. We want to embrace them. We want to help them. We want to get them help so that they can make changes in their life. We talk about a navigation center, which I think is fantastic for the people that are going to use it. But first and foremost, you cannot change addiction until someone that is addicted makes the choice to change their life. So a navigation center will work for some people, but what percentage of our homeless population, especially the ones that we see on a daily basis that were accosted by walking down the streets, that are in addiction crisis and refusing to do anything about it and subjecting us to their refusal. What can we do for ourselves when we encounter those types of situations, which we do on a daily basis? That's what I feel like some of the people here tonight, we're not afraid of someone who's having a mental health crisis because we know we can get them help. It's the people that are refusing to take care of their addictions. And I can speak holistically to addiction because my dad was an addict for the greater part of my life. And he was sober for 43 years before he died. But it didn't change until he made that choice. We can't force them to make those choices. But we're being forced to deal with the consequences of them not taking accountability for their behaviors. And that's what I was looking for an answer for tonight, and I don't think I got it. But I do thank all of you for being here. I really do.
I appreciate that, and I think there are a lot of people frustrated with that situation. I agree with you. That's one of the biggest challenges that we face, in that we have these folks that are addicted, like you're talking about. We arrest them sometimes. We take them to jail. They get right back out. They won't change their behavior. We're frustrated by it as well, and that's one of the reasons that we did want to engage with the community to try to figure out how we can best address that, because we don't want that situation either. So. If we have felonies, yes, I agree with that. But they need to be, well, serious felonies or violent felonies. Yes. I agree with you. I'm just as frustrated by that situation, and a lot of times we feel like we can't hold suspects accountable. So we do want to find a way to better address that. And I'll tell you, I think we need to improve on how we work to address that. So I appreciate your comments.
So we've talked a lot about mental health tonight, but not so much about the safety of our community and our tourists. On multiple times over the summer, I've had people come into my work because they needed to get off the street because they were afraid of somebody that was following them. That is not okay. I've had to hide girls in dressing rooms because somebody came in looking for them off the streets. Now, when I have myself or my business have been threatened in one way or another by these people, and I did get a response from an officer, the response was, until something is done, there's nothing that can be done. So a threat, just a threat until they do it. I would like to remind the community, many years ago, of Jason Fugit. He was a transient who has spent a lot of time protesting on Main Street. Police had a lot of interaction with him, and nothing was done. And on Christmas Day of 2017, he ran into Campos Casuals on Main Street. That man did not go to jail for that. So I guess my question is, what are we doing for the safety of the community? Because if nothing matters until something actually happens, that's not okay. And Sandra brought up a great point for community watch on Main Street. That's a great idea until I have to walk to my car at night by myself. It's not safe at all. No.
Well, first of all, if an officer's telling you there's nothing that can be done, that's not what I want to hear. If they're saying that, then we're going to correct that and address it, because that's not the mission that I want to go forward with. There's always something we can do. It may not be an arrest, but there's always some type of action that we can do. Mr. Fugit, if I remember right, was arrested and he was sent to a mental institution and then later released and was not prosecuted, if I remember right. I'd have to.
Now he's in jail again for something else that he did. So, I mean, obviously it's not doing much for them.
Well, like I talked about, a lot of these criminal justice changes that we've had, Mr. Fugit, what happened to him is a product of a lot of these criminal justice changes. And that's why, in my opinion, he wasn't fully held accountable for that. I don't remember every exact detail, but I'm familiar with the case, and I believe that because of a lot of the way our criminal justice system has gone, he didn't get held accountable. And these things that you're bringing up is another reason that I want to get to where we have an officer downtown. And, you know, we talked about it's very difficult for us to handle everything we have to handle when we're running at 48% staffing. And then we have state mandates and training requirements on top of that that we can get in a lot of serious trouble, serious liability on the city if we're not meeting. So I'm not trying to make an excuse in any way. I think we need to improve. And that's one of the things that we want to get to, is having a presence downtown so we can deal with those issues. That's the goal we're trying to get to in the spring of next year, to have an officer assigned down there. So I appreciate the points you're bringing up, and we do want to make positive change to make Lakeport, make everyone feel like they're safe in our community again. Yes.
Stay close in case you want to stop me. Law enforcement has a fairly robust lobbying organization, and it has lobbied. It lobbied against realignment. It lobbied against Prop 47, Prop 57. I think a message is being sent here by a number of bodies. First of all, the legislators are not listening to what we have to say. They've proven this many, many times. The judiciaries are not listening to what we have to say. They've shown it many, many times in these decisions. Cities have used their lobbying bodies and their organizations, and again, it doesn't look like they're listening to government. So what I encourage regarding a lot of these things that are being discussed are changes in legislation that limit our staffing, they limit our ability to respond to calls for service, they require us to take much longer time in dealing with these situations, and when we're already short-staffed, it taxes us that much more. What I encourage you is contact your legislators. Contact your judicials. They're in the community. They live in this community. Speak with them. Express these things to them. They both need to hear this. We agree. Our frustrations are your frustrations. We are your community. We live in and amongst you. We have for many, many years. We agree.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Well, I want to mention that, you know, in the coming years, we're going to have a great increase in homelessness. We've got artificial intelligence now that's taking out a lot of jobs from writers as well as everybody else. We have robot cars. We have all these different things, which we're going to have a lot of people that won't have the money for places. And, you know, 200 years ago, here in Lake County, there was no such term as homelessness. Everything had a home. The insects, the birds, all of life. And, you know, we've got to look at this in a way like, what do we have for, you know, it was mentioned encampments. You know, are there places where people can set up, say, a tent and have bathrooms and just the minimum of facilities so they're able to live, where they can shower, but be able to set up something for themselves and their families if they're in these hard times. You know, we haven't got anywhere near the number of people to really service this. I mean, something's coming up which will house maybe 40. We've got a number of maybe 100 or so. But we've got over 1,200 people that, and the number of that are having mental illness or, different, problems along that are very small compared to the whole number of homeless. So, I mean, a place just where the modicum of like the bathrooms, and showers where people can present themselves and clean up, where maybe they could have a locker where they can put their clothes and a few of their belongings. We've seen situations like in Santa Cruz where I followed where people they go away from their tent, and all of a sudden in comes authorities and they're throwing all the photos of their families, all their personal belongings, throwing them into a trash.
So what you're talking about, the city manager mentioned our concept of the navigation center. That's what our plan to deal with that would be. But that's not going to happen until we have a lot of community input. There's going to be meetings about it. There's going to be community input. But I understand what you're saying, but we can't just we don't have a place where we can just set that up and allow that. Okay. Right now, these encampments are causing a lot of fire hazards, a lot of other public safety issues, and that's why we have been offering the people services, and then we have to shut those encampments down. Thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, but if something could be looked into that in the future, because that is the growing problem. Thank you.
We are. You want to address a little bit? Yeah, go ahead.
So this probably isn't a complete answer to your question, but I think it's a great opportunity to highlight some of the existing work that we have. And Lake County Behavioral Health, in addition to providing outpatient and all kinds of mental health and substance use disorder services, also operates 4 peer support centers across the lake, as well as contracts through Redwood Community Services, an additional peer support center. So they're all different. And what I want to highlight is the one that we have in Clear Lake Oaks. It's called the Big Oaks Center. It's it's by Country Kitchen and like that area, the Big Oak Center. And so on Tuesdays, they are, through a lot of community partnership, they have actually worked with Adventist Health, and they're bringing a shower trailer there every Tuesday. I think the last count that we had, the last event, we were up to like 60 showers that day. There's also the food bank comes there and does a giveaway, and we also have representatives from the Department of Social Services there to help enroll people in other benefits that they may be eligible for. And so that's a small example of something that is happening, and I do admire and appreciate and would love to support the proposed navigation center to expand those kinds of services and supports for the city of Lakeport. Thank you.
Yes. Well, hang on, I have one in front. Go ahead, Angela. And did we arrest that individual? Was there an investigation?
There was an arrest, and I don't know what else happened after that.
Okay. Well,
But they do retaliate. She was talking about that. I think that's one of her fears, and I picked up on that. Because it happens. Especially when we go to beats without lights on the street. But I think if we have the resources, like with the neighborhood watch, maybe the neighborhood watch could have some people in charge that have the first aid, the mental health first aid, and they have the resources. Like say, okay, this person is showing substance abuse, who do we call? This person's having a psychosis, a psychotic break, who do we call? This person's just straight violent. This is a naked person at the park. It's so much going on. If we had the resources for where we needed to go, easier at hand in the moment, I think that might make a big difference.
we can help get you set up with that. As far as the retaliation, what's that? Yeah, that's a good idea. We have spoken to the Main Street Association and some of the other business associations, but I don't recall that we've given them any type of a pamphlet like that. So we're yes, and I think that I'd like to follow up with both of you two. Sandra's gone now, but she talked about the downtown maybe watch group. I think it would be good to have another smaller meeting with those folks down there and see how we can get this information out to you and address it a little better. I think I would like to do something like that. Really, it comes down to a lot of situational awareness on the retaliation. You know, that's something that should be called into, is something that we should respond to and try to address, but obviously we can't be everywhere at all times, so we rely on the community to be aware of situations. I call it situational awareness, being alert for these kind of suspicious things and getting that information to us. Even if it's not something that we have to go to right now, that's why we have that directed patrol thing that you can go on the website and it'll send us an email. But certainly if it's a danger, something that's happening right now, we'd want to get a call, because that's the only way to ensure that we can respond quicker. You know, the emails are slower. But I think, you know, we really should get another meeting set up with the businesses downtown again and discuss these issues and, you know, solicit feedback from you guys like you're doing now to find out what you need. Yeah. Do we have a mic?
Can I interrupt for just a second? For all of those that are watching the stream, because no one's using a microphone, I just wanted to alert them that we are going to stop the stream, but I don't want to stop the discussion, because the conversation is healthy and it's productive to be able to listen to one another. So just for those watching on the stream, thank you for watching, but we're going to turn this off as we're having a little bit more of a ad hoc type of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. Yeah. Does that mic work, Megan? Go ahead, Mike. Right here in the front first. Mike Borg has a question. Was she? Okay, I'm sorry. I can't see up there.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I'm a nurse at Sutter Lakeside Hospital, and I more than understand short staffing, okay? I live across the street from Clear Lake High. I have been complaining for years, and I'm disheartened by the fact that I see absolutely no police present at night patrolling the school. My car's been vandalized. My car has been subject to, and I know this is minor, but the kids are throwing eggs on my car. I come home I work in the OR. I come home sometimes from call at 2 o'clock in the morning. What is going on across the street is I smell marijuana. I hear multiple groups of teenagers, possibly, I don't know if they're teenagers, but running around all over. I've continuously asked just to patrol the area, okay? Just very recently, I had 3 gentlemen that pounded in at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was on call. 2 o'clock in the morning, flew out of bed. They were pounding on my garage door. The police officer, you answered very promptly, but we didn't catch them. And I just thought to myself, that's just about it. I have just about had it. Because I know that if there was a patrol there nightly, it might really help decrease the situation. My neighbor has paint all over her garage door, okay? And the police officer that was on duty that night spoke to me and my husband and said that you had 3 police officers for all of Lake County on patrol. That's disheartening, you know? I'm not happy living across the street from the school at all. So, you know, I know it's a little bit out on the limb from homelessness, but I'm going to tell you what, I don't feel safe when I get out of my car at night at my own house.
I appreciate your question, and I'd like to have one of my officers that's here talk to you and see if we can, work on addressing that patrol up in that area. I have 2 sergeants right over here. If you'd be willing to talk to one of them and see if we can address that. Thank you. Mike?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, I was downtown Calistoga walking around with my family, and I didn't see no homeless. We walked by the park, I see no homeless, and it's like, what are those cities doing that Lakeport is not doing? Because Lakeport is like, I know several businesses downtown Lakeport that lock their doors because they're tired of homeless coming in there and wanting to use a bathroom or making a scene. And it's just getting sad that these people have to pay rent, have to pay taxes and water and all these things, and they're locking their doors because they're tired of homeless coming in there asking for things. And like I said, Calistoga, if you go there, they don't have that problem. You go to St. Helena, doesn't have that problem. Hillsburg doesn't have that problem. And it's just, why is Lakeport have this problem so bad? And it's just getting worse to me every day. I see, somebody said something that, oh, it's homeless people that were raised or that are from here. And I see new people every day that are not from Lakeport or Lake County. And it's just getting very frustrating that people are just getting very frustrated that, they don't want their kids going to the park anymore because of all the homeless hanging out there. And it's just getting very unfortunate. And the homeless are making it their home. And it's not for the kids anymore. And that's what's sad.
So to address your question on Calistoga, Mike, I did talk to them 2 weeks ago. The information I got from their police chief, they have on average between 2 and 3 chronically homeless that are in that city, which is a lot less than we have. And based on my conversation and discussing the issues and the makeup of the community, the main reason is that where they're situated and they don't have anything for the homeless in that, or the unhoused in that community. They're not a transportation hub. They don't have the type of shopping that they would basically like to be around. So they all mostly move down to Napa, and they're concentrated in the Napa area. So Lakeport, if you look at kind of our makeup in this rural county here, we're kind of a transportation hub with the buses around the county. We have grocery stores. We have a lot of county services, government facilities here. And that, in addition to Calistoga, I've talked to other cities that are actually bigger than us and smaller than us that have a similar type of situation, that have 2 or 3 people like Calistoga does. And it's been, from what I found, because of the type of makeup we have, what's available for them here, as opposed to Calistoga. So that's what I found out. But, yeah. And that's a good point, Lieutenant, because a lot of people do get out of jail, and some of the folks that you've seen, they're not from this community. They're here for a while. Go ahead.
So they stay here. You can't ship them back to where they came from?
If they have a home or someone that's willing to verify that they have a place to go, then I can take them back there. But if they're an unhoused individual, and then I can't just move them to another community.
But it does seem like they're moving every day, or every couple days. There's ones you haven't seen
And some of that is because of the jail. And we have encountered, I say, you know, for the majority of the homeless individuals that are chronically homeless do have a tie to Lake County, but I'm not saying there's no new ones, because there are. It's just, you know, and most of a lot of the ones that you're seeing here for a little time are from another city in the county. Right. The neighborhood watch and all that. And we don't want people to feel unsafe. We don't want people not to want to walk around the streets. You know, we do want to improve this. That's why, again, that I want to get an officer downtown to help with that.
From an operational perspective, and you know, I hate to harp on staffing, and we all, with a lot of places are short-staffed. But the reality of law enforcement is we work in two realms: reactive and proactive. Proactive enforcement, patrolling the neighborhoods, that requires staffing. And there are a lot of other factors in dealing with somebody who we arrest that become time consuming and have become considerably more time consuming, especially if somebody needs medical clearance, which a number of people, especially people who are using controlled substances, using alcohol, especially to great extents or for prolonged periods of time, oftentimes get our officers at the hospital having to do medical clearance. It's an hour and a half at a minimum. And you know, until we start seeing the benefits of the hiring endeavors that the city of Lakeport has been involved in, you know, November, December, April, then you'll be seeing more of those patrols. You know, but remember, we look great on paper, but we're still rebuilding.
So thank you for the opportunity to come here tonight. A couple things. I came here in 2015, and one of the things that I noticed when I was recruited to come work here, they took me on a tour and tried to convince me, and it was a 62-mile trip all the way from where I was being recruited to back to where I was being recruited, and I was shocked. And I really got tuned into the public transportation system. Recently, I had an opportunity to take some of the buses here, and I talked to a lot of the bus drivers, and I found that they weren't aware of this meeting. So I would hope for the next meetings to be maybe involve some more of the stakeholders. I talked to the director of the bus services here, and she didn't know about the meeting. So I told her, you know, definitely your buses and your drivers are working with the homeless every single day, all day. And she told me that, yeah, in fact, in the morning, the buses are so full coming from the warming center that other people aren't able to get on the buses. So just the idea of making sure that this is maybe a little bit more advertised and more stakeholders can get involved. With respect to that, I only heard one mention of the people who are living in their cars. So to maybe expand the concept of homelessness a little bit, we got sort of into the encampments and people unhoused. But we're coming up on winter. We had the worst, if you want to call it the worst winter in, 40 years. We had snow. We still have waterfalls and snow closures in Yosemite. Who knows what's going to happen next year, but a lot of the people that I speak with, I walk my dog almost every day down there by the lake. I talk to quite a few homeless people. The ones that I've noticed living in their cars, sometimes they don't have driver's licenses, insurance, registration. Their cars are in a state of disrepair. They have no place to park. I'm not trying to discourage people from living in their cars, but when they lose that level of being sheltered and they become what I consider to be truly homeless, that becomes very critical. And so I'm not sure what the rules are around that, but again, that's something that you mentioned with this navigation center, I think it's called. But if you could kind of expand on how that works exactly, because I do see quite a few people living in their vehicles, and I'm just not sure what the rules are.
There's a lot there with your question, but regarding the people living with the navigation center, the way that we've kind of envisioned it, and again, there's going to be public meetings about this before it ever happens, but the concept that we've talked about would have like a parking area for those kind of folks that are living in cars. It's illegal in the city of Lakeport to have a car on the street for more than 72 hours in one location. If they're trying to live in the car down by the park, that you can't stay overnight there, so that's a limitation as well. And we are very cognizant about the fact that, you know, if we tow somebody's car, we've taken their home away and put them in a worse situation. So that's something that we deal with and we're aware of, and we try to work with folks. And it is a concern, but that is an area that we want to try to address with the Navigation Center. Regarding the advertising, we've been advertising this since July. We've been on the radio. We've been in all the newspapers. We've been on all the social media. There's thousands of people that knew about it. So I feel bad that there's people that didn't hear about it, because we tried to do the best outreach we could to include spending money on all those advertisements. But this thing was live streamed. That video is going to remain available on our channel so people can go watch it. And this thing tonight was just, we're envisioning more community meetings in the future focusing down on these issues. So hopefully that answers that question.
Hi there. I live right across the street, like really close. Like, I have a problem with the violent homeless, I guess. Not even homeless, because some of these people have places to go at night. It's the people that pollute the public places with violence and trash and yelling and screaming. I heard a little while ago, there was the guy up there, he dropped an S-bomb, some people got upset. You should hear the ramblings and screaming and violent rhetoric right on the other side of this door, because I can hear it from my front yard. My kids can't play in their yard sometimes because there's someone here screaming horrible things, how they're going to murder and rape everyone and whatever they're screaming. At the park, there was a guy screaming. I told him to stop because he was by kids. Turns around, starts threatening to shoot me. I have a bat by my front door my wife and I refer to jokingly as the bum chaser, because I've chased 10 or so people out of my yard that show up. I've had 2 bikes stolen out of my yard. That's the thing I think people are most upset about, not someone that happens to be homeless. I was homeless like 3.5 years ago, living out of my car. I think we all have empathy for the homeless. I think the homeless themselves and medical or substance abuse and mental illness, we all have great empathy for that. It's the very few dozen or so violent people that are suffering from the same things, but they're violent. I think that's why most people are upset.
Yeah, thank you for.
My question is, what can we do about that? That's what I think most of us
Are you calling us on any of those situations?
I have myself. I have several times. Sometimes it doesn't handle it. Sometimes, unfortunately, it hasn't had a response timely.
Okay.
That's one of the things also that we see sometimes. Sometimes no one calls us. I don't know if it'll be a response to us. It's not. He's just yelling and screaming.
Well, anytime that you think we should be responding to something, you need to call. You shouldn't be concerned about what we're doing. We might be tied up, but we still want to have that information. We still want to be able to get those calls so that we can respond and try to find a way to address it, whether it's arresting the person if they're committing a crime. If he's threatening to shoot you, that's a criminal act that we should be responding to if they're making those kind of threats. And I don't know all the situations that you have or haven't called on, but I would like to talk to you more about that to see if we can get more into the detail and help you out a little more with the situation.
I just wanted to say, despite, all the emotions here today, I just want to say I'm grateful to be part of such a great county. I moved here from Kern County in 2019, and, I moved out here homeless. I didn't have a place to go. I didn't have a job. I didn't have an income. I didn't have, stability. And being a part of this team and seeing so much that they have to offer, and being able to be that first line of helping somebody get into a better situation really is a reward to be part of this team. And I just want to say that thank you guys for giving me this job, for putting me in this place to be able to help such a community that needs it.
Are there any more questions tonight? Go ahead.
Take the children over to the bus stop. Oh, I'm sorry. Over to the bus stop not too long ago, and they had seen needles around on the ground right at a bus stop. So they come back over. We call the police department. They say, "Oh, that's not our line of work. We can't help you do anything about that." So we call the health department. They tell us that's not their line of work. We can't have you do nothing to help you. We're like, well, then who helps us? What about these children at the bus stops? What do we do?
Where is this bus stop at?
It's over by the over down there by Altera Drive.
Altera Drive?
Yes.
Near the gas station down there?
Yes.
Okay. That is outside of my jurisdiction.
But who do we go to ask? That's what I'm trying to ask. What if we have a situation like this, and this is involving young children, then who do we go to ask for help? That's all I'm asking.
I mean, the answer to a lot of those questions is, and I hate to say it, because it means calling the police. I mean, the reality is, until the mobile crisis team and the substation concept of behavioral health is in full swing, call the police, because we're still going to be the de facto first responders to these calls. That doesn't always mean that we're going to be able to do something, and it doesn't always mean that we're going to make an arrest and that somebody's going to stay in custody, because we are but one cog in a system that it may not be a big surprise to you that it's broken in a lot of regards, and we've demonstrated some of that brokenness. So, but in this instance, that's not our jurisdiction, and I hate to say that, because shouldn't we just go do police work? But the reality is, I have a boss, and he has a boss, and he has a boss, and the overall boss are the taxpayers in Lakeport who pay for our services. So and we do, in a lot of regards, have good relationships with the other agencies where we will go help them, but there has to be a limit to that. So we can't go to Altera. Your sheriff's department should be responding to that call, in my opinion, but they don't work for me. The officers at the sheriff's department, deputies at the sheriff's department, they don't work for me. They work for their own supervisors. So, but that's the agency that you should be directing that, in my opinion. I would want you, if it was the city of Lakeport, to be directing that to us. And if our officers said, we don't do that, we don't respond and pick up syringes, first of all, I'd be surprised that any of them would ever say that, because we do that regularly. Yes. Now, and then, where we go from there is relative to fact-specific information. Do we know who had them? I mean, the reality is, we're not CSI. We're not sending them to the lab to get fingerprinted or DNA done on it. It's just not realistic. But we should be, at a minimum, responding, collecting those, making sure that it's safe then, and trying to do some proactive work that will get better. I used to say, send us your children. That's what you can do for us. Send us your children, your family members, to get into this line of work and be cops. Now we actually have those people. We just have to get them trained and on the street, so we're realizing it.
Okay, well, thank you for your input. I was just wondering where
And-
can we go to ask?
Yeah, we
Thank you.
cannot speak for the county jurisdiction.
Well,
But
next
what-
time we will call the sheriff's department and ask
what I
because
can
we weren't
say,
informed of that.
in addition to our officers responding to those calls, our public works department also picks up needles too, when they find them in the parks, and we get calls. So both of our agencies in the city work together on addressing those kind of things. And I'm sorry to hear that everyone in the county is saying, everybody you call is saying that's not my job. But, yeah. It's not a crime anymore to have a needle like it used to be.
Okay, we were just concerned because it was at
right.
the children's bus
That's-
stop with these young children.
That's a
And
very valid
I
concern.
was speaking because I do work in multiple different,
But
on the sub for Lake County.
What we will do is if you'll leave your contact information, we'll try to find out, or I will personally try to find out how you can get that concern addressed. I'll make some calls to the people I know at the county departments.
Thank you very much.
All right. Make sure you fill out a card and put regarding syringe on there with your number. Any other questions? And we will be, there's a lot of cards here that we didn't get to. The people that put their information, we're going to get back to them. And we're also going to get back to the people that were leaving comments online. But if you want to be in the loop on anything we're releasing at a later date for follow-up on this, then I would ask you to make sure you fill out a card with just your name and contact info so you can get our messages regarding any follow-up.